All right. Okay, everybody, welcome to Rick, Rabbi, and Rashi. My friend Rick and I, we talk about the Parsha, and we share our conversations. So it's a nice. So yeah, Rick, tell me what you read the Parsha. The Parsha is Terumah, and Terumah has a lot to talk about.
So I thought it was interesting that Terumah is sort of contribution, the contribution that the people bring to create the tabernacle, I think is interesting. And also the concept that it's not just the contribution, but it's also sort of donation, right?
Right.
They're donating. And but I think the part that really interests me the most, and it leads to my first question really, is that this Parsha reminds me sort of the directions we might use to build the next Star Wars Lego figure. And I guess what the question becomes, because there's so much detail here, what is the relevance of all the specific design components and materials specified, and how does that material tabernacle structure create the bond desired between God and man?
Great questions. So I want to share just one thing that really sticks out is there's a lot of parshas, this one next week and the week after, that talk about because the Torah speaks like 30 verses or something of the creation of the world, and there's like 4 parshas dedicated to the building of this Mishkan, which is just interesting, how much ink is spilled. And the Torah really is very, very careful not to waste words, So before we talk about the particular, materials and the symbolism, which might be beyond the scope of our conversation or my knowledge at the moment, there's so much detail. The general, that's your question, right? The general concept, there's so much.
Yeah, I mean, the point is they are very specific about how much silver has to be brought, or how the bows are made to fit the rods for the acacia wood, and how the linen curtain between the tabernacle and people. I have a question about that we'll come to later, but all of these things about the way it's built and the way it's created, and even the cherubim that are created. Why do the cherubim have to be created out of the cover? Why can't we just create cherubim and place them on the cover? So I have questions about why the specificity of all of this. I mean, were these just engineers who were writing this up and thought that it was a great way to do it?
So I guess what I'm getting the question is like, this is history. We're not doing this again. So what if it's a manual how to do it in your backyard, DIY temple, then okay, give me all the details. But if it's a one-off historical thing, then why so much detail? That be the question?
Yeah, right. I'm curious. And also I'm curious how the detail really interacts in terms of our bond between God, how the tabernacle, the Mishkan actually creates that bond between God and man.
So I think, first of all, we have to remember that this is not a one-off historical event. This actually was a prototype for ultimately the Jerusalem temple. And the Jerusalem temple, while it was bigger and there was some differences, a lot of it is similar, maybe a little bigger, a little, some different specifications, but it's pretty much this is a prototype of that. So this is a blueprint that was used again. So it is important to know, it's practical. You have to build this house. It's a mitzvah to build this structure. In the desert, it was this portable Mishkan, tabernacle. But in the future, by the Jerusalem temple, and Mashiach comes, the temple built again. Again, it is different, but it's following similar. There's many similarities, and a lot of it's the general structure, the general makeup is the same. So that's just on a practical level.
But isn't the Mishkan when the temple was built, and obviously we're moving farther ahead in history, but when the temple was built, is not the Mishkan put into the structure that we build?
That's a good question. I don't believe so. I
Okay.
believe the Mishkan was brought to Israel. They didn't build a temple for many years. And the Mishkan was put in a few locations till it took them 500 years to build the Jerusalem temple, from the entry of Joshua till the building of the temple in King Solomon's time. So the Mishkan, I don't think I'm not sure about the furnishings, like the menorah.
Okay.
Maybe was that reused, repurposed? Was it made again? It definitely was made again at some point in history. By the second temple, because I believe after the first temple, all the furnishings were hidden away or entombed somewhere. But that's as far as when you talk practically, like you're saying.
Yeah.
It's not. It makes sense if this is going to be the way God wants a home to be built for Him, and it has to be done at all times, in theory, at least, if we can, like in ancient biblical Jerusalem and so on. It happens. Mashiach will come. It says it will happen again. So, okay, but putting that, having said that, not just give a sort of easy answer, there is a lot of symbolism here. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs mentioned this, I mentioned before, there's 30, 40 verses or something, 20 to 40 verses about the creation of the world. And there's hundreds about the creation of the tabernacle. And why is that? And he gives a very simple answer. He says, the Torah is less concerned about how great God is that He creates the world. That's not the purpose of the Torah. The Torah is about how man can create a home for God. In the physical embodiment of that home, that was the Mishkan, and later the Beis HaMikdash, the temple. But on a symbolic level, it says, okay. We know the famous verse, V'asu li mikdash v'shechanti b'socham. Right? God says, they will make for me a temple, and I will dwell in them. And
right. in their midst.
It's funny. It says, right. I will they will make for me a temple, and I will dwell in Him. And it's grammatically incorrect. It should be in them. Literally, the word is in them. So you could say it means in the unit, the whole community's midst, the singular community's midst. But the rabbis say this teaches a very powerful lesson in the Talmud, that God is saying, dwell in every individual Jew, make a temple for God in him or her. In that one person, there'll be a temple. So you see from the get-go, the whole idea of the Mishkan, Beis HaMikdash, was sort of a physical place, but it mirrored what's going on in the individual making a home. And this is not Kabbalah. This is basic Talmud, commentary from way back when.
Okay.
So that was your. Now, once you know that this is some sort of blueprint for making a home for God, which is a very big deal. It's there must be a lot of lessons to be learned in the inner temple that we're making from each of these furnishings and the materials and all the many details. So that would, I guess, answer your question with the details. So a lot of lessons to be learned.
So go back in Torah, and in creation, and God creates us in His image, right? I mean, that we are God. We are part of God's image, and we are not God, but we're created in His image. So if that's true, so I question why do we need to build a home for Him if He already is in us, right? In other words, God is everywhere, right? And God creates us. So why do we need to create something that already is created? It's sort of like overdoing it, right?
So just to give you a little bit of the history, world history in 90 seconds.
Okay.
God creates man and woman in the Garden of Eden. It's a perfect world, and God is everywhere. And God is not just everywhere. God's perceived and felt everywhere, right?
Yes.
They sin, the world is degraded, that now, although God is obviously everywhere, but God is not, that's much more in the back end. You don't see that. You see the front end, you see the physical body, you see the physical stuff, you see independent, autonomous beings, you see apples, you see trees. Where's the pulsating life force that connects it all? The godly flow. You don't see that. That's hidden. And every generation thereafter that sinned, it was, it just coarsened the detachment of things down here to its godly source. Then you go back, to Abraham, and he starts revealing that there's a godly pulse in everything. And he reveals it little by little each generation, culminating in Moshe, when Moshe, by the 10 the 10 plagues and the Exodus, and the culmination of giving the Torah, Moshe brings God back to earth, not back to earth, but reveals that God is always here, and God wants stuff from humanity and is part of humanity, is caring for humanity. So Moshe revealed God back on earth. Moshe was the leader when that happened. Then the Jews sinned by the golden calf. So what happens at then is that God says, I'm done with this. Like, hey, this we have to do a reboot, new people to do this. Moshe says, no, we're going to please forgive them, and God forgives them. But what happened was that the world stayed course, in the sense that it was not, you couldn't see the divinity. We weren't back to square one of Garden of Eden, but we were back a notch in the sense that it wasn't as easy, to overcome the facade of autonomy of stuff. Things look separate and, not part of Hashem's plan, God's plan. So God says, many opinions hold that the giving of the tabernacle, the commandment to build it, was after Moshe obtained forgiveness of the golden calf. So this was saying, look, God says, we know the goal is for the Jews to lead the world in making the world a home for God. But Moshe says, but can you be in their midst? And God says, yes, but it'll have to be concentrated to one perfect, when I say perfect, I mean like one really hyper-focused place where there's the service of the Kohanim. That's all about, it's perfectly aligned with God, with the godly will, which a lot of the temple symbolizes, the furnishings symbolize oneness, and I will be there. I will be revealed there. So your question was like, isn't God everywhere? Yes, God is everywhere, but God's not revealed everywhere. The temple was to be a place that man can have a place where God is revealed. That God through his efforts, man through his efforts, can really make a place that is 100% aligned with God's will at a very high level. And therefore, it says there was miracles. In the temple was a place there was certain miracles that happened. It was a very spiritual place. Whatever exactly they were is not important. So that sort of, it's that little corner of the world where God is revealed.
So that sort of begs a question for something in the future, and that is, if God is concentrated within the Mishkan, and after the second destruction,
in the Mishkan, and every time. Well, I'm sorry. Finish your question.
No. Okay, no. You'll probably have the right answer.
No, but finish. Ask your question so it can.
Yeah. So if God is revealed within the Mishkan, and obviously we need to have the temple to sort of be that focus, which is what you were just referring to. So the revelation can't, after the second destruction, Rabbinic Judaism has to find some other way to reveal God to people, right? And I think there's a whole other element that comes into Judaism, and that's why Judaism changes from being focused on they're focused on renewal of the temple, but they know that they're in exile. And so my question is there revelation for us since there is no
So
temple?
it says after the destruction of the temple, God is found in the 4 cubits of halacha, of Talmud, of rabbinic teachings. Right. That which was before the destruction, when there was a temple, was in a very concentrated, well, actually, it's back up to the first temple. By the concentration of the first temple, they were really dependent on the temple, to the point when there was destruction. In 70 years of exile, Babylonian exile, they almost thought they almost assimilated to the point of no return. Like they were so dependent on the temple that 70 years of Babylonian exile, which, by the way, sort of culminated by Purim, they were almost entirely assimilated. The Jews, most of them, I don't know if most, but many, a large amount, intermarried to Babylonian families, and many did not want to come back by the second Aliyah, by the second temple with Ezra. What happened? Why is that like 70 years? We're 2,000 years that we have some sort of thing going on. They couldn't do 70 years. And they were really, because back then it was so clear that Judaism was temple-centric, Jerusalem temple-centric. It was not, it was almost unsustainable. So once in Babylonia that they overcame that exile and they came back, the rabbis then already started laying the groundwork for non-temple centric Judaism to be to diaspora Judaism, synagogues and stuff like that. They started laying the groundwork for that. And then there was a temple in Jerusalem, although there was always a parallel community in Babylonia. And then when that temple was destroyed 420 years later, what did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, the leader who smuggled out of the Roman siege and threw himself at the general and Caesar Vespasian, he says, give me, you're going to destroy Jerusalem, I can't stop you, but give us Yavne, the city of Yavne, where we can at least make a Talmudic academy to carry the remnant of Judaism forward. And that actually was the antidote of survival. It didn't take away the horrible destruction, but it was the little seedling that how it could continue. So, like I said, God, after the temple, God is found in the 4 cubits of halacha. That's what it says in the Talmud. I mean, the idea that God is found in our everyday actions became the primary focus of Judaism. It was always important, but there was also the temple. It was kind of like you could always rely on the external big, God revelation. After that was gone, which was a huge loss to not have that in the world in such a way, now it becomes all about the personal revelation, the personal finding God through the action, through the learning Torah yourself, through doing mitzvot yourself.
Good answer. Thank you.
So what was next on our agenda?
So I have been sort of impressed by the requirements that everyone would have to give 2 half shekels of silver to create the tabernacle's base, which I sort of felt signified an equality of devotion to God. I call it our joint venture with God. I thought I'd put a business aspect to it. We have a joint venture with God, right? I mean, right. So the question is this tabernacle, the Mishkan base, a metaphor for communal tzedakah? And does the word tzedek, which comes from the same shoresh, from the same root, signify righteousness? And as a Jew, should we have to strive to be righteous with all of our actions? It's a big question, I know, but
so there's a tremendous amount of symbolism. I'll tell you, it's beautiful. I've been learning this in the mornings with teaching people daily Chumash class, and we've been getting a little bit into it. With a little more time, is everything, the way the ark is made, the covering of the ark. The covering of the ark sort of represents, there's so many details. Like I'm scratching the surface myself. But in regards to communal giving, yes, this is definitely a prototype of communal giving. In general, your connection of tzedakah and tzedek is a general thing, which is known. Tzedakah is not charity. That's a mistranslation. It's the best they can do in English, I guess. Charity denotes something that is more like you're generous, you're a nice guy, you're being charitable, you're being extra kind. Tzedakah is not extra kind. Tzedakah is base righteousness. It's justice. You have to do it because we believe the stuff that we have is not really ours. We're just trustees of the things God gives us. And the whole reason God's giving it to us is in order that we can do good stuff with it. We get to keep a lot, by the way. We get to keep 90% or whatever. Or whatever the ratio is. But we're the whole reason we have it is really that we're custodians to do good stuff with. It's not like I was actually we do a teen Parsha class every week, and we have a debate. So we have a hot topic, and this one is Judaism's system more capitalistic or is it more socialistic? Is it like, if you look in the Torah, is it more, would you say it's akin to modern capitalism or is it more akin to socialism?
So I think Judaism is a collective, right?
It's a combo.
Right.
Very, very short, the way we do research is Judaism is capitalism with a socialist spirit.
So you can think about it like it is in Israel. There was the kibbutz, and now there's the moshav. And the moshav allows you to have some of the profits, but you still work for the collective goodwill of everybody. So So I see Judaism as sort of the moshav.
So if I remember to send you this article that I got this idea from, is that it's really this idea is that the Jubilee year is when all your property is returned to the original owners. So the Jews come to Israel, they're given, every family gets a parcel of land. If you sell that land, it doesn't get sold for good. It gets sold up to 50 years till the Jubilee year. Then it goes back to the original owners. So it's funny, if you sell, it's yours, you could sell it, but you can't actually sell it entirely because, you can't sell it entirely because it comes back to you. It's not entirely yours to give. And this is the idea of that God gives us stuff, all the many things, the gold, the silver. It's not really, it's God's. But God's giving it to you. So he's giving it, so it's yours, but it's yours not just to keep taking in, it's yours to be an agent of good with it as well. Of course, to enjoy life and have a good life as well and take care of yourself. So you're kind of getting this, back to what we're saying here, it lists the 13 or 15 materials saying God gives us all these types of things. So many things, not just money, it could be talents. You're a custodian. It's tzedakah, it's tzedek, it's justice for you to give, to think of, what do I do with this? Like, I don't just have it and I get to I can just, rot, I can just rot on it, What do I do with it? What's the justice I can do with this? And that's the most, as you know, that's the most fulfilling way to look at stuff.
And the truth is, we're not here forever. So, the idea is that even if you think of things as being permanent, they're really only lent to you.
Right.
And so if it's lent to you, and if you firmly believe that what you have is greater than what you need, right? I mean, then you take some of what was lent to you to work with others, to do good things with others with what you have.
Totally. I think what's interesting, the younger generation, they have to know, I think in addition to what you're saying, is that you really feel like you're doing, everybody's, what's my purpose?
Mm-hmm.
You have to frame it in that, I think, in that language that, if you have stuff, your purpose is embedded in that stuff. Find how you can go do something with it. And the Torah tells us how to find our purpose in our stuff. There's a certain baseline of charity, the tithe, 10%. But then, as you know, it's interesting in this example, because tzedakah is really a separate commandment, although this is similar. in last week's Parsha we had the idea of tzedakah. The idea of this, certain things, you had to give a half coin of silver. Everybody had to give the same.
Right. That was the
That
equality piece. That's
went
the
to
equality.
that went to the silver like sockets, the silver bases.
Well, it went to the base. There was two half shekels each of silver, and one went to the base, and the other, I think you're right, was used for other things.
Right. So yeah, the other stuff, the types of red, purple, turquoise wool, the gold, the silver, the gold, that was voluntary. So it's kind of like Judaism. It reminds us as a baseline. In the baseline, that's like sort of the socialist way. You have to give. It's you must give the 10%. Like you have to. But don't think you stop there. I gave, I'm done. What are the extra blessings I have, or talents, or money, whatever it is, that I can give a beautiful, turquoise or purple or red or gold or other copper thing. You have to be more. It leaves up to the person the rest, in the sense, and that's why there's some that was mandatory, but a lot of it was voluntary.
Now some of it is practical also. Remember, we come out of Egypt, we have a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think there was I don't like to say it, but it was sort of the government was sort of taxing us to make sure that we sort of got to a baseline that was manageable.
But it wasn't taxing. It was voluntary.
No, I understand. It was totally well. We have the mandatory.
Besides the silver, right? Besides a couple, but the majority of it was voluntary. So
no, agreed.
The Torah says in the first verse, right? Speak to the Jews; they shall take Terumah, a donation to me,
right,
from every man that his heart behooves him.
Right,
has to be that his heart prompts him to give. So it's very interesting. I think it's important to get to a lot of our conversation of these details. Is it just charity? But it's a certain take on charity, right? It's like it's a mixture. Some is mandatory, some is leaving up to you, and that's that. One idea. There's a lot of things. There's the ark. Talking some of the specifics that you were. There's the ark that's built. There's the menorah. There's the the table. There's the altar. There was the tapestries, the curtain divider. So I'm not going to have enough time to go through. Any of that interests you that you want to talk about?
So I thought about the menorah. I thought was interesting that it's forged out of the fire.
Right.
And I find that interesting that the menorah is the symbol of the state of Israel. And when I hear that it's forged out of the fire, I think of the state of Israel as being forged out of the fires of the Holocaust, right? I mean, that symbolism came to me as I read that. I found
beautiful.
that.
I did not think of that. It did not occur to me.
And I felt that was to me it was interesting to get that feeling from having read that.
Yep, that is a very. We shouldn't have to have fires to have menorahs, though. We should know more of those. I hope.
No, I understand, but I mean,
that's what happened.
But the fire is the part that is the creator, right? It creates this beautiful menorah with all of the different branches, and the way that it's created is art. It's beautiful, right? It's not. It's not destructive. It's constructive.
Yep, and you saw the image. One interesting notice that people think the menorah is rounded, and there are some opinions that say that, but it seems to be that Rashi and Rambam, two biggies, saying it was diagonal. There are some that argue, but that seems to be, and it's funny how the rounded one became sort of the rounded one became the more famous one.
Yeah.
But the diagonal one is the more, probably more what actually was.
That's interesting. I didn't think about that imagery. That's an interesting thought. So let's go back to my thought about being that God is all around, and I know you answered part of it, and so I want to ask a different question. That's obviously God is all around. He speaks from the bush, right? He creates the plagues that free us from slavery. And even in the prior parsha that we talked about last week, he bestows the tablets to us from on high, right?
Right.
So therefore, why does God say, "I must dwell in their midst"? Okay, why does He have to do? And we're going to go back to this because it's something that bothers me a little bit. Why does it have to be within us? Why can't it just be all around us? I guess why the distinction? Isn't God all around us? I asked that question before, but I want to probe that a little bit more about, God is doing all of these things for us. So therefore God is everywhere, right? And I know you said that it's important for us to have it inside of us, but maybe we go a little further.
So, what comes to mind listening to that is we all know that life and parts of life are not equal in our emotions and our feelings, right? There's times when you just get through stuff. There's times when you feel really good. There's times when you're searching. And I would say, let's go back. What's the goal? What's God's mission statement to the Jewish people? Change the world, spread light, teach morality, not just for yourself, but be an example and a teacher to the nations.
Yeah, a little light into the nations.
Light into the nations. But what's the mechanism? Like, it's important that there is a mechanism of how stuff is done. We all agree we want light unto the nations. We want light everywhere. We want goodness and morality. But there's a mechanism. And think in your own life. What's the mechanism for focusing your own unique talent or light or to the world? There's a time when you're more focused, more inward. And there's a time of the day even when you're more outward. And one feeds the other. It's sort of a cycle. One is giving and taking from the other. So think about in today, give a sort of you should have a couple minutes left, so I guess we'll end with this idea.
Okay.
That this, what would be like a temple in your day, your 24-hour day? I would say it's when you pray. When you pray, when you're doing more mitzvah, when it's very very spiritual. Because mitzvahs don't have to be in a temple. Mitzvahs can be in the farm, But we're talking in the sense of mitzvahs in the spirit, overt. The temple was about overt spirituality. You felt God's presence. It wasn't just you did God's will, you felt God's presence and will. When is that today? That in a 12-hour waking hour, 14-hour waking day, it'd be the hour or two that you pray, when a person prays. Or other such moments when you study Torah, you're not dealing with transforming others or the world. You're really just swimming in divinity. What's the goal then? We know the makeup of the normal person's day. Even someone who's studying Torah for a lot, you got to go deal with stuff. You got to go get it, whether it's work, whether it's teaching, whether it's taking care of your family. There's a lot of pedestrian things you do throughout the day. And that's where we take the light. That's what the menorah, back to the menorah. The menorah is sort of that bridge of taking the inner light of the inwardness, inner spirituality, and shining it to the outside. Essentially, the menorah in the temple in Jerusalem, the windows were, usually windows back in the day were like two panes. One was the outer pane was wider, and the inner one, the outer one was skinny, and the outer one was wider. So it like shone it spread the light inside. The temple is the opposite. The skinny window was inside, and the bigger window was outside. You're spreading the light outward. If that makes sense. So that's kind of back to saying the menorah maybe answers your question of, we know that the goal is to make the whole world full of light, but we have work to do. There's a job. There's a way it's done. And the way we know everything is done, I think that this kind of follows, is that there is a small little place inside of you, or in the world, it was the temple, where it's crystal pure, of really getting in touch with that overt spirituality. But that's only a small sliver of yourself or the world. And the goal is to spread that outward. And that's culminates with Mashiach, when we've been doing this for 3,000 years, the Jewish people, we do this a lot, and bring a lot of non-Jewish partners in as well. Where we've transformed a lot of the world. The world has been a lot of transformation happening. We got more to do. And that's why we're here. But we're going to sort of parallel that mechanism of the small little place of spirituality and spreading that out. So that's an idea there. I want to wish you a good Shabbos.
Thank you. Good Shabbos to everybody who's listening.
Thank you all for joining us.
Rabbi.
Feel free to add any feedback. Email it. You can email me at yhein@jewishpittsford.com. Any interesting angles you would like to hear on the Parsha. So have a good Shabbos.